AM by Arctic Monkeys, released on September 6th, 2013 on Domino, produced by James Ford and Ross Orton. In 2023, Blur frontman Damon Albarn called Arctic Monkeys the last great guitar band.
It annoys me to say that because I don't like paying compliments to anyone, but it has to be said.
Pelle Almquist of the Hives echoed that same sentiment around the same time, saying,
"That's the only good, really popular band, and that's not easy to do." You know?
Of course, there are plenty of great bands out right now. We've talked a lot about them on this channel. Pro Martyr, Always, Fontaines DC, Sheermag, Idols, Geese, Wednesday. But despite the much welcomed resurgence of rock bands in recent years, there are still none yet to have achieved the commercial success of the Arctic Monkeys. So in this episode, we're discussing the album that took the already massively popular Sheffield band to a whole other level. Welcome to Self-Titled. My name is Seth Sparks. I will be your host today, and I'm going to discuss the album's background, the trajectory of Arctic Monkeys before and during this period. I'll also touch on the track list song by song. But at the end of the episode, I do want to talk about the tension that I feel between the undeniable commercial success of this album and how it lands for me personally. Because for all the respect I have for AM, there's a little bit of a disconnect that I find fascinating. So if you want to skip straight to that part of the conversation, there are chapter markers in the episode to take you there. But to jump right into it, for this album, you know, it's really hard to argue that during this period, pop and hip hop are dominant. For several years, bands that were widely popular during this period, talking about people who were playing the massive world tours and stadiums, a lot of them were holdovers from the 90s and the mid 2000s or the early 2000s. And the Arctic Monkeys carried this mantle for quite some time when it came to rock bands, when it came to guitar bands. And AM was their defining statement. This album has a lot of energy. It's very accessible. It's also a fairly big pivot for the Arctic Monkeys towards what, to my ears at least, has become a much more pop-oriented sound. In fact, I had similar vibes to another pop album that we discussed on this podcast a few months ago, which was Mark Ronson's Late Night Feelings. But AM charted at number 1 on the UK albums chart, which made Arctic Monkeys, see if I can get this right, the first independent label band to debut at number 1 in the UK with their first 5 albums. It's a very specific first, but also very impressive. And it also peaked at number 1 in several countries across the world. Debuted at number 6 on the Billboard 200 here in the US, where it was certified 4 times platinum. The critics, for the most part, loved this album. Again, it's a stylistic pivot to a more polished sound, albeit retaining the band's heaviness, I would say. Before this album, Arctic Monkeys, already massive in the UK and well regarded elsewhere. They'd been debuting albums at number 1 since their first album. They'd already headlined Glastonbury. AM made them globally dominant guitar band, especially in America. Do I Want to Know broke them into a different stratosphere culturally. And I first became aware of this band when their first album, Whatever People Say I Am, That's What I'm Not, was released. There was a ton of buzz and build up around that album. And I was immediately sold on them. And I clearly remember the video for I Bet You Look Good on the Dance Floor, which was like a live recording of the band. It starts with this maybe 20-year-old pimply faced Alex Turner in a plain t-shirt saying,
"We're Arctic Monkeys. This is I Bet You Look Good on the Dance Floor. Don't believe the hype."
Very endearing, but they tear into this blistering punk song that has so much energy, a lot of wit, and just watching it was just like, you know, damn, these guys are immediately a dominant force on the scene. The album was so much fun. Turner's lyrics were so much fun. The energy was really infectious. Their follow-up album, Favorite Worst Nightmare, was also excellent. And then I kind of lost track of the band. There was so much interesting stuff coming out, and like so many artists that I like, things got lost in the shuffle, no fault of the artist. But now when I go back and I listen to Humbug or Suck It and See, I think they're also really strong and unique albums in their own right. But with AM, the band consciously sought out a very different sound. Turner said that at the time he wanted an album that sounded good in the car, like 50 Cent's In the Club. Whereas Suckin' and See had the band rehearsing endlessly in a circle and recording the album just like they played it live, AM saw the band experimenting with the studio. They moved to LA. They're all living very close together. Alex Turner and drummer Matt Helders have a house in Silver Lake. They rent out Sage and Sound Studios. They start exploring new sounds, textures, and recording methods. Over 6 months, they develop the sound that you hear on AM. They are building loops and writing guitar and vocal parts on top of that. One of the things that caught me off guard about the band in this era, as I said, I hadn't seen them in a bit. When I did see them playing live to promote this album, I was struck at just how different their visual aesthetic was. Turner went from being that scrappy punk kid to having like a 50s coiffed hairstyle, like wearing leather, a lot of swagger. I didn't really know what to make of it.
Getting his hair in a quiff and that, and big biker leather jackets on, you know what I mean? It's like when he goes back to his mum's, does he really walk in the door with that biker leather jacket on and go, "Hey, mum, can I have some tea?" You know what I mean? She's going to give him a clip, isn't she? You know what I mean?
But I think there's a lot of impressive stuff to discuss in this album. It's great on many different levels. And we'll just jump right into the track list here with Do I Want to Know? So AM wasn't immediately on my radar, but this one definitely crept into my world. It was obviously a hit. You didn't have to like look up how it was performing commercially, but you heard it and you knew that it was going to be huge. This was technically the second single released from the album. And at this point, 2013, hearing a guitar hook on commercial radio, especially with like a really well-performing song, was a fairly rare thing. There's been a lot of interesting analysis of this song in particular, but the thing that people point out is that the guitar riff is not the type of riff that you play while simultaneously writing a vocal part over it or singing a part over it. If you can imagine how the riff goes and how the melody goes, the two don't synchronize in lockstep. It's a little bit awkward to write and play simultaneously. There's another effect of the band writing songs in this new way of layering tracks and then writing on top of that. The type of thing that you would write, say you're writing on the guitar, you're writing a riff, and then you figure out how to sing in a way that fits, that you can make them both work. They're just layering and layering. And that's how you get an evolution of a song like that. But throughout this album, there's just a lot of cool stuff that you're going to hear recurring. One of them is these great falsetto vocals, and they set the stage for that a lot in the song. But this song is one of the most well-known of any rock song in the 20th century thus far. So very dominant and very prominent. Even to this day, it's still out there in the wild quite a bit. Next song is Are You Mine? The first part of this album is just unrelenting.
I'm a puppet on a string, Tracy Island, time traveling diamond, could have shaped heartaches.
This was the first single from the album. The band recorded and released this months before even recording the rest of the album. Also very popular when it came out. Turner said it almost immediately became their most popular song. That great riff was written by bassist Nick O'Malley. Something cool about this band, like the band members contribute heavily to the music. It's not just Turner. Vocally, this harkens back to the approach of earlier Arctic Monkeys albums, at least for me. Next song, One for the Road, the fourth single from the album. The pop vibes really start to come through on top of that sinister sounding bass and guitar riff. And this is also the first appearance of Josh Homme on backing vocals, which I'll get into a little bit more. Love the guitars on the bridge to this song in particular. Moving right along to Arabella, number 4 on the album. The fifth single from AM. I keep using the word like sinister, but these evil sounding guitar riffs make this album so much fun. They sound like they really do sound like they're off a hip hop album. You can tell that was an influence of Turner's, but that bridge when Turner sings My Day's End, My Day's End best when the sunset gets itself behind. It's really cool. One of my favorite songs off the album for that very reason alone. And then you get a riff in the song too that's just sounds like it could come from any of your classic rock heroes like Zeppelin or AC/DC. Super cool stuff. I Want It All, number 5. The energy just keeps pummeling you at this point. The song is built off a riff in this constant state of tension, never really quite resolves itself. Cool guitar solo, a lot of those on this album. This was the first song that we've discussed so far that wasn't released as a single, which is just crazy. Number 1 party anthem, number 6 on the album.
So you're on the prowl, wondering whether she left already or not. A leather jacket.
Preview of the sound that the band would go on to embrace with their follow-up album, Tranquility Base Hotel and Casino, where the band largely ditched the guitar-centric sound altogether. But the guitars are still pretty prominent here, doing really cool stuff. They weave in throughout the song, and they help build this mournful post-party vibe is the only way I can think to describe it. Turner's vocals have always been key to the band's sound, but they have a really interesting arc. It's fascinating evolution, even by the time that we get to AM. And here he's doing that thing, that crooning thing that he kind of goes on to really lean into. And this is different from that rapid fire, but less melodic approach that you hear, for example, on their debut album or in their earlier material. But with every album, he's more conscious of melody, seems to be more confident in his vocals. I don't know if he took vocal lessons. I'd read that some speculation on that. I don't know for sure, but it would make sense considering how his range and abilities grew in just a few years' time. Next song, Mad Sounds, written by Alan Smith and Alex Turner.
Mad sounds in your ears make you feel alright.
We're clearly into the chill part of the album after being hit hard with all those heavy riffs. Super cool guitar playing though. And even though we build to a crescendo, it's not huge, it's not overdone, it's tasteful. The songs on this album really do get in and out. It's very efficient. Fireside, number 8 on the album.
I can't explain, but I wanna try. There's this image of you and I.
Great groove on this song. Nick O'Malley's punchy bass on top of that propulsive percussion. This might be my favorite song on the album, between the main groove and that beautiful chorus. And then you get to the solo, if that's the right word for it. This reverb-soaked melody that puts it over the top. Song number 9, Why'd You Only Call Me When You're High, the 3rd single off the album.
The mirror's image, it tells me it's home time, but I'm not finished.
Turner just cranking up whatever kind of sleazy energy he has all the way up here. Very strong hip-hop vibes again, but very memorable chorus. This song epitomizes a lot of what I think this album is best known for. Also, super fun video of Alex Turner playing a really drunk version of himself. That's worth checking out. Number 10, Snap Out of It.
I get the feeling I left it too late, but baby, snap out of it.
The 6th single off the album. These cool descending riffs throughout the song, a real timeless sound on Snap Out of It. Like, you could hear this being on an Amy Winehouse song 10 years before, or even like a soul song decades before this came out. So also very reminiscent of the Last Shadow Puppets for me. Number 11, Knee Socks.
You got the lights on in the afternoon.
I love those Josh Homme backing vocals. He brings really cool energy to the song. Another one of my favorites. More cool guitar riffs that are just more about setting the atmosphere of the song than being like a memorable rock and roll riff. Throughout this album, you have those trademark moves, and you have tight bass and drums, those falsetto vocals, the Turner crooning, a lot of reverb on the guitars that kind of shimmer above everything else, and about those Homme backing vocals. Josh Homme said of AM that it's not disco, but it's like a modern dance floor sexy record. Pretty good description, actually. And then we get to the last song on the album, I Want to Be Yours by John Cooper Clarke.
I wanna be your vacuum cleaner, breathing in your dust.
Turner took a John Cooper Clarke poem as the lyrics to the song. Again, more Last Shadow Puppet vibes for me. James Ford production. I haven't done him enough of a service on this album, just ignoring James Ford up to this point, but you can't ignore his production when you talk about that sleek, somewhat seedy, but silky smooth energy on this album. And also, I really like how Turner takes John Cooper Clarke words and fits them into the structure of the song. Very fitting closer to this album. Feels like a good wrap to the party. This has a timeless feel again. This album, I think, will sound good in 10 years. I have saved, at least for me, what is the most interesting part of this album. So let's talk about how Arctic Monkeys fans feel about this record. And I do need your help for this because I really don't know a ton of big Arctic Monkeys fans personally. I can only speak for myself. And I think that this album is the slickest album of the band's catalog, especially like up to this point. It's definitely the most rewarding for the band commercially. But I also think that there's something about AM that keeps me at arm's length. I didn't choose this album to talk about because it's my favorite. In fact, I would probably rank the 4 previous albums above AM just for my own taste. But I think this album is fascinating in the same way that I think Tame Impala's Let It Happen is fascinating, which we also talked about on this podcast. Similar for me in a lot of ways. Arctic Monkeys, they're popular. They do well commercially, but they're really better known in indie scenes and in their home country than in pop culture. But then they tap into something that breaks them into the mainstream on a much bigger level. And when a band does this, it's like they crack some sort of code on how to reach wider audiences. And you wonder, did they always know how to write the most commercially viable song? Was it this confluence of circumstances that led to all of this? And I mentioned earlier that when I first saw, the band from this era, it had been a while for me since I'd been exposed to them. And I had like this whiplash seeing them in this stylistic suave form that seemed almost contradictory to that aesthetic that they previously had in their first album. And I was conflicted about that at the time in a way that I'm not so much now. I mean, bands are always put in an awkward position when you consider the choice that they're presented with throughout their careers. Option 1 is to stay true to the sound that you established, that you built the audience with. And option 2 is to evolve. And depending on the course you take, mainly are you getting weirder, more experimental, or are you aiming for a more commercially viable sound? In which case you run the risk of alienating, if not just pissing off your hardcore fans in exchange for a much greater number of more casual listeners. But I respect bands that take chances and evolve. Not in a forced way, but in a way that's in keeping with what interests them, where their curiosity lies. And I do think that Arctic Monkeys followed their curiosity here. I can't read their minds. Maybe there was some calculated decision to make money, but I don't think the quality of this work is bad at all or suggests that was their motive necessarily. It sounds like artists who are keeping themselves interested and trying things that match their intuition. It's great for the band that they created this album, that they reached a whole new level of popularity in this era where guitar bands weren't having this level of commercial success. But ultimately, if there are parts of this album that leave me somewhat colder than previous albums, it doesn't mean that I don't enjoy it or that I don't respect it. At this point, any disconnect I have with the material speaks more to a matter of taste than a matter of authenticity or the quality of the music. I'm glad that Arctic Monkeys were able to carry that mantle for guitar bands at a time when that was less common. But that's why I think this album warranted its own episode. All of those things that I'm referencing, a new direction, commercial success, this evolution of a band, those things just fascinate me as a music fan, even if there are other albums in the band's discography that resonate with me more personally. So there you go. There, my take on it, but I want to hear your take on it. Were you already a fan before you heard AM? Did this album turn you into a fan? Is this your favorite Arctic Monkeys album? If not, what is? And please let me know your thoughts on AM and Arctic Monkeys in general. If you enjoyed this and you're watching on YouTube, show me some love, show me some encouragement. This is my first solo pod, so we're hoping this goes well. Support the show by subscribing to our YouTube channel, by liking the video, by leaving a comment. We also have some cool album discussions in the works, including Fugazi's The Argument, Shame's Drunk Take Pink. Both are personal favorites of mine. So follow our podcast to hear more conversations about the music that you love.